Hey guys, thanks for joining us on the Elation podcast today. We are here with Adam Campo. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good.
Good,
Thanks for
good,
having me.
absolutely good to see you. And it's crazy to just figure out. We just found out we're a family.
We did.
Just in the room just now. So,
Yeah.
so now this podcast is going to go a little differently. I can push him a little harder. But no, man, it's definitely good to hang out with you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're from and your origin story?
So, origin story for me, I'm a New Orleans guy, Louisiana guy, born and raised here. Actually grew up in the East. Kingswood was the first neighborhood that I ever lived in. Went to school out there and then moved to Metairie sometime in the 90s. Graduate of King, then UNO, and spent a little time in France at Sapagro.
I got you. How was
Yeah,
that?
that was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did an exchange program there and stayed a little later than I should have. So,
How long were you there?
About a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
Yeah.
wine and cheese, huh?
Yeah. Wine, cheese, and coffee on the beach.
There you go. That sounds like fun. So I hear you play a little bass guitar as well.
I do. I actually played in a band in the early 2000s called Two Way Radio. We did a couple of shows at Tipitina's, and sort of with a house band there for a minute. Played a show at House of Blues, which was pretty awesome. The
Yeah,
parish room there.
absolutely.
And now I got two kids that play music now, so that's the only band that I'm playing with these days. And usually it's bass guitar, and I'm getting really into cigar box guitar right now as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's a different sound.
it's a little swampy.
Yeah, definitely a different sound. Teaching your kids is important. I mean, music is a easy gateway to other things to learn.
Right.
So I feel like music education, and we've talked about that a lot, is something
Extensively. Yeah.
that definitely needs to be built up here in New Orleans as well as everywhere else in America.
Without a doubt, and I think just the sort of sentiment around it as well, or the philosophy around it, changing your thought patterns, the way you think, and the way you carry yourself, and making you a more rounded or well-rounded human being is important as well.
100%.
Yeah.
I think it teaches you how to experiment as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you start to listen for things that aren't necessarily on the paper.
Right.
Right.
Right. And look, if you're playing in a band, you get that collaboration responsibility. You're getting all these other things out of it as well that you get from having to be responsible to other people for other things.
100%. Same thing sports does for you and all that stuff. So it's definitely just as important.
Yeah.
Let's stay on that topic for a minute because
Sure.
Education is something I know, we both want to help out here in the city. What do you think tech-wise would be a couple good things to implement into some schools here?
In schools, for tech, I mean, film being a big industry here, music, sort of on the cusp of making a resurgence here as well. I think that's a good place where tech meets arts. It's fun for kids to have those mediums, and then what they produce out of it, I think, is something that they can be more proud of. I mean, aside from things that are just very, obvious, like hard
Right.
coding and how to, take apart a computer, put together a computer, and
Right,
those sort of
100%.
skills, how to build a website.
Right.
I hear my parents talk a lot about how, they don't teach kids how to write a check anymore in school. And that mentality really needs to shift to how do you do a podcast,
Right. Absolutely.
So,
Well, and I was actually watching Kevin O'Leary lately. He was saying that every few years he goes in and he looks into his internal companies that he owns and sees what they spend the most money on, and then tells people to go into that industry. And,
Right.
and that's kind of like how he gauges things. And he said 3 years ago, I told everybody engineering.
yeah.
He goes, and then I just did it again, and I would say content creation is what I spend the most money on
Yeah.
across the board in every company.
Yeah, agreed. And I think content creation, tech meets art, art being tech. I think they're kind of one and the same. I mean, even if you look at larger companies, national companies like Tesla, yeah, they're making tech, but they're making art.
Right.
So
100%. Well, that was definitely an art. A painting for him was a Tesla for sure.
Right, right.
That came out of nowhere.
Right.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about the film industry,
Sure.
because I know you're heavy into it with the LCD screens, and let's talk about Bright Frame a little bit, and
Sure.
and tell us a little bit about some things you've done with it.
So the big application for us is the LED screens. We really love that space. We're more of a post house, similar to what you're doing here. A lot of posts for music. We have a Dolby Atmos room as well. We have good space for music videos on a soundstage with a 26-foot screen inside of it on a truss. And that's sort of where we're attempting to fit into this space. The LED is really what excites me more than anything else. We have the 26-footer inside of a studio. We have 40 feet of indoor, 40 feet of outdoor that are mobile, can be deployed anywhere. and we're starting to get into some holographic glass or LED glass applications as well that are
Very
really
cool.
really cool. Yeah, so.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, so talk about a little bit about that. How did that idea pop up? Where did that come from?
So that idea actually came from our owner Ronnie Mayans, and we got into the film space, and we met some good people with Film Fest in Louisiana, Sarah Escalante and a couple of other people, and we had the opportunity to view your space, and we viewed the ranch, and we viewed a couple of other spaces, Beth Burvant's place, we looked
Hmm.
at Beth and Trey's place,
Right.
and and we just realized that we needed something a little bit larger, not only for deployment of filming on a screen to get the proper distances, but just for building them. We prior to that we were putting together a lot of test screens and things like that
Hmm.
in an unair conditioned space because it was large enough for us to do it. And some of us guys doing it are a little bit older, so that was a little bit strenuous. So having a large air conditioned space where not only we can build giant screens or giant letters out of screens, but where we can experiment with glass and LED and those kind of applications really increases our productivity because we can have 4 or 5 projects on the floor at one time,
Right.
and not have to clean everything up to keep a 10 by 10 space in a normal room clean.
100%. Let's
Yeah,
talk a little bit about the technology behind the hologram glass. So
sure.
how does it work?
So LED glass is generally speaking a wider pixel pitch than you'd be used to working with on an LED wall. Where if you were working at like sub 1 or like 1.9, 2.9 even, you'd be in the 5 to 6 range for like sort of the best of that. It almost looks like a tint when
Hmm.
it's off. When it's on the glass and there's nothing on the LED, it just looks like a
You can see
tint.
through it?
You can see through it, and that wider pixel pitch is what makes that possible. You get tighter with it; it's more of a mesh, and it's harder to see through.
Gotcha.
So the resolution's not as good, but it being on glass and that you want your images to kind of be sort of opaque or sort of transparent anyway.
Right.
You don't want a solid image on that.
Right.
The cooler things.
Or moving things,
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, and you don't have to have the space around it, so it can look like it's floating or different things like that.
Right.
It's more of an augment reality if you think of it like the same thing with augment glasses. This is the same application on a much, much, much larger scale.
Scale, right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Well, that makes a lot of
yeah.
sense.
And then one of the cooler things about it too that I thought was neat was black not being a color
Hmm.
is not represented in the spectrum in augment glass. So
Hmm.
anything that you have that would be normally black or shot in black or filmed in black
Well,
will be non-existent on it.
that's definitely cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really actually cool.
Yeah.
So how does I know music fits in a big part of that because Dolby Atmos, virtual reality, augmented glass seems like it all kind of coincides.
That's that immersive space. And I
Right.
mean, everybody's played with this, I think for, a decade or more now. Even when we were young, we were looking at, the Nintendo Glove and the
Uh-huh.
first versions
Uh,
of VR and things like
My
that.
favorite thing was I had this bazooka thing that I used to shoot at my Nintendo 4. I don't know what game it was called, but it was huge, and you put it on your shoulder and you shoot. You
I,
feel like you
I,
were shooting.
I remember it. I do
Yeah.
remember it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think everybody in that sort of space, gaming or entertainment, people are looking for immersive things. And the problem that I see with VR, and this is just my personal opinion, is that it's a lone experience. It's
Right.
not a shared experience. If I'm playing VR, yeah, I can cast it to a TV and you can make fun of me playing Blade and Sorcery and,
Right.
knocking people around. But sharing that experience with someone is what made gaming fun when I was growing up. Playing GoldenEye or WWE with my
Right.
buddies
Right.
while we were eating pizza and drinking cola was what made it fun.
Right.
And the immersive space that video games and movies and music and those things are getting into, I think what's really great about that is now you can create these sort of rooms, like escape rooms are doing this essentially
Right.
without LED, without Dolby, without this kind of tech that we're
Right.
talking about. And I think taking video games, movies, things like that to the next level with those applications where, this visual is here, or here in a movie rather than very two-dimensional, and then the sound corresponds to that with Dolby Atmos as well
Right.
to make it feel like that shout or that gunshot or that explosion is coming from not just behind you like a surround sound system, but
Right.
directly from this point in the air.
Right.
Which I think is a really cool application.
Yeah. Well, it makes it so much realer, and I mean,
Yeah.
and actually feels like it happened naturally.
Right.
You
And
know.
and look, even just speaking to what we're looking at right now, and we use a lot of the same things you use for demos. That Elton John demo
Oh
in
yeah.
Dolby,
Oh, it's
everybody has the same reaction to
Right.
that when you get that first whoosh of the rocket that goes around the room.
100%.
It really it ruins the song.
I
You can't
you
listen
can't
to it in your
hear it any
car
other
anymore,
way.
right?
No, I know.
So
It's ridiculous. No, but you're right, and that song definitely it's made people cry in our studio,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, like, it's because it's such an iconic song,
Right.
so when you strip it down now, I do say not all songs stripped down in Dolby sound good.
Sure. That depends on your engineer and your mix
It
and
does,
yeah.
but I feel like, some of those songs were the glue of the blending of those frequencies that were off a little bit
Sure.
is what we almost attach to. And
Sure.
then when you strip it down and it sounds so clean and perfect, it's like, and I mean, I really feel like, a lot of artists have that with demoitis. They'll send them in for a mix and then it'll get cleaned up and they go, that's not the same song. It
Right,
doesn't feel
right. It
right.
doesn't have the same feeling about it, and
You know?
I could agree with that. I think the sort of hi-fi era of music is probably going to be, and then earlier jazz applications and things like that, where the imperfections are what make it so perfect.
Right.
And I
100%.
agree with you. I think stripping those things away doesn't make sense for people or for those musicians that are really in those spaces.
Yeah, well, but it does make sense to start recording in Dolby.
Well, without a doubt.
So, and I know we were talking a little bit about doing some work on that side.
Yeah.
How how do you think that should be approached? I mean, recording in Dolby is it's kind of a crazy concept. I mean, I would think.
Sure. I think I like the idea right now, specifically of live performances recorded in Dolby.
Right.
I think that's probably the most interesting application. They got this Eagles track out right now, and it's got the crowd noise and it's got the typical 45-minute horn intro that the Eagles do.
Right.
But when you're listening to it in a Dolby room, you know, you could pick out this one woman screaming off to your left
Right.
that was there,
Right.
right? Who may not even be with us anymore at this point, which I think is really sort of immortalizes the feeling of that show and how
Right.
interesting it is. But I think, interesting mic placement at live venues, things like that, to recreate live performances,
Mhm.
which for me personally, I don't enjoy listening to live performances that aren't live
Right.
or recorded live performances.
Right.
I just don't like the sound, and it's not immersive enough. I don't feel like I'm there. I think
No, and it
yeah,
gets a
it
little
feels like
muddy,
you're
and
listening to a
somebody's
subpar
always
version of
a
the
little
song.
off,
Sure.
or.
Sure. But I think with Dolby and what makes it interesting and recording in Dolby for those things is it really does feel like you're listening to a live performance.
Right.
You can close your eyes and feel like you're at that
You're
Eagles
you're
concert.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
So
100%. No, and I do think that's what is amazing about Dolby, and it just opens up the space so much.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel like you're in a bigger bubble.
Right.
But so let's I guess let's talk about a little bit about where you think the film industry is going in the next 5 years here in New Orleans.
Sure. Uh 5 years is a long and a short time.
Uh-huh.
And in the realm of politics, which I think has the biggest effect on film, it's a relatively short period of time. I think a lot of the answer to that question is going to depend on how involved the legislature gets
Mm-hmm.
with propping up the film industry. I think the state probably needs to have a recognition, and the leaders in our state need to have some recognition that film is a huge sector of the economy. One third maybe of the major economy, tourism, oil and gas,
Right.
film,
Right.
should be considered to be that
Important.
high and that
Right.
important on that list. So I think the incentives where other states are starting to get competitive in those incentives, we've got to study those. We've got to look at those. We've got to go after them. I think the space for independent films, smaller films, is probably going to grow in this region. But I think we're probably, if we get everything right, we're going to be on a rebound from the strikes and everything.
Right.
And, I definitely agree with Carol Morton's statements on those as well. That we'll be moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I definitely think most of the legislators understand what's going on,
Yeah.
and I think the more people like us that invest in the industry, I think it will definitely help.
Yeah, I agree.
But where I think finding those applications, those different applications, like I know you were just going to Nashville recently to bring back industry here. Let people know that we're here
We're
with
here,
Atmos.
right? We have infrastructure.
Right. So how important do you think that is for us to reach out to other cities?
I think it's incredibly important, and I think that that's got to be two prong. I think we need leaders doing that, but I think we need guys like you and me doing that as well. We need artists doing that. We need people that record. We need engineers doing that. We need
Right.
everybody doing that.
Absolutely.
And that's social media and word of mouth is how things spread now.
Absolutely. Well, we have to create a culture,
Yeah, exactly.
you know. Um, and I think going back to education, I think if you start early, you definitely build a culture.
Yeah, without a doubt. And then I think we're seeing some of that, especially around music right now, to create that culture, to bring that back. There's a lot of people, New Orleans and company, Kevin Ferguson, some of those other people there, that are talking right now about why the music industry, was the epicenter of it was New Orleans in the 50s,
Right.
and prior to that, and why that left, why that went away, how we get that back. The branding of it, those kind of things. Austin branding itself the music capital of the world, which
Right.
which is just branding.
Which is branding,
Yes.
right? Because it's not true.
Right.
It's not true. I'm saying right now, it's not true. Well, tell us a little bit about CRC.
So CRC is actually a larger global company. CRC is one of the owners of Bright Frame. CDM is another one. It's Ronnie and Jenny Maines that own the company. It started out as a shipping and logistics company, large into the ag industry, coupled with our nonprofit We Care, We Share, which we donate food to food banks, and we do work in San Pedro Sula, Honduras, which is one of the most impoverished and violent places in the world.
Right.
There, we actually have a music program as well that we help supplement. And I got the chance to hear them perform at last year's Hispanic Gala. It's an orchestra. It's a kids orchestra, but they play Game of Thrones and they play Pink Panther and they play really fun stuff, right?
Right.
They played Coldplay. It was awesome. So our company though, CRC, expanded from those two elements based on where we saw needs in the industry. We had real estate, and people would say, do you have a warehouse for this? Do you have one for that? So we expanded and started a real estate division.
Right.
And then people would get that real estate, and they would say, well, can it be like this and not like this, or built like this? So we started a construction division, and we had to pick up our garbage from the construction elements, so we started a dumpster division. And the studios fall in line with that. I get asked this question all the time when I go places. Tell me everything CRC does. And to some degree, it's sort of like saying what GE does or what Disney does.
Right.
Or it's easier to explore that with what you do, and then what we can do with you.
it. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it facilitates a lot. It's a huge logistic company. I mean,
Yeah.
And we were talking about the buses too. Your bus idea.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about that.
So this is an augment glass idea as well, but it's we grew up with SR2.
Right.
So you had those immersive spaces for roller coaster rides. I think they had one at the Ottoman Zoo when we were growing up.
Right. Right.
And you'd get in this box and it would, the screens would come on and it would look like you're inside of a roller coaster and it would jostle you around. So one of the things that we're building is we're actually hoping to build out some of the World War II sites around the world, have a bus that we can take to schools or corporate events or anything like that. And the augment glass would put you in an airplane, not in a battle,
Right.
but flying over a memorial, or in a submarine looking at a memorial, or on the beaches of Normandy or Utah looking at those memorials, or anywhere in the European theater, the Japanese theater, or North Africa, or even Hawaii.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, being in battle would be more fun, but
It would. But we don't want to scare the kids.
But I want to be in a dogfight. I want to know what it feels like to get shot down. No, that sounds amazing, because I know, and I think movie theaters need to go in somewhat of that type of experience as well.
I agree. I think that would, supplement what's happening with the movie theater industry, and sort of how it's hurting. It's
Right.
hurting right now because of streaming, and because people can watch at home, and because home theater systems are so good
Right.
these days that it's I'm
Tough
not
to
going to
get
say
you
it
off the
registers
couch.
on the same level as a movie theater,
Right.
but it's getting more difficult for
Especially
movie
when your
theaters to.
3-year-old yelling behind you.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
no.
And you deal with that all the time at every movie you go to, and
Right.
we hit the dinner movie theater up by us a lot, and we like it because it's the food, it's the big chairs,
Right.
it's so some of the movie theaters in the industries they're realizing that they've got to change, they've got to adapt with what people want, and I think the immersive experience is already there in sound. Theaters
Right.
understand the value of Dolby, but maybe it's time to start exploring that space for visuals.
Right.
How do we make the visuals at movie theaters more immersive?
More immersive, right.
And look, the best example I can think of that is the Back to the Future ride.
Right.
You know,
Absolutely. I think Alien did one
yeah,
similar too,
Alien did
right?
one similar as
Yeah.
well. But I mean, that's that you sit in the DeLorean and you fly through time,
Right.
right? So I think if movie theaters can start giving us a more 4D experience,
Right.
you know,
Well, I feel like it would be more personal too.
exactly.
You know,
Yeah,
just like Disney is, you'll sit with 3, 4, 5 people, you know,
sure.
and that's your experience.
Right. And that immersiveness has been the allure since VR was an idea in the early 90s and the late 80s.
Right.
But I think
They tried it with IMAX,
they did. They
and
did.
it was cool.
IMAX was cool, but IMAX's idea of immersive was bigger. And I think we can do better.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With the
No.
tech we have now, we can do better for sure.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. I definitely agree. Well, let's talk a little bit about what brings elation to you in your life.
Lots of things. So a lot of things, and I mean, the standard answers are obviously family, friends, and work in that order.
Family.
Which we happen to be. But I think creating, experimenting, creating, learning, absorbing things, and then having these small marks, not on time, history, or the world, but
Right.
just on right now.
Right.
I think that brings me the most elation and the most joy. Is just the ability to work with people like Bruno every day, work with people like Justin every day that I work with, and we just get to do cool stuff.
Yeah, no, and if you truly get to do what you love and make money at it,
Yeah.
you're definitely the luckiest man in the world, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
or the
they say,
luckiest person
they
in the
say
world.
you'll never work a day.
Yeah,
Right?
no, 100%,
Yeah.
100%. Well, great. It was great talking to you today, and I
Likewise.
appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for
And
having me again.
why don't you tell everybody a little bit about the socials for CRC and Bright Frame and
Sure. So Bright Frame socials are Bright Frame LA on Insta. Our website is brightframe.net. And CRC, if you're looking us up, is CRC Global Solutions.
No, thanks for joining us at Elation today, where we enjoy exhilarating euphoria through creation and collaboration. Thank you.